Hi, I'm David Blakesley, and this is my review of two films just released through the Janus Contemporaries line, published by the Criterion Collection, Room 666, Room 999. This is a review copy sent to me. Very much appreciate the opportunity to engage with this Blu-ray disc from Janus Contemporaries. So yeah, these are two films that were shot 40 years apart at the Cannes Film Festival in 1982 for Room 666, directed by Wim Wenders, and then Room 99 was directed by Lubna Playust, female director, in the 2022 Cannes Film Festival. And the title has nothing to do with the occult or anything like that. Room 666 just happens to be the number on the room that was checked out by Wim Wenders to set up this experiment in which he asked a question. Is cinema a language that's about to die? Or there's a specific question. In fact, let me read it to you. Is cinema a language about to get lost? An art about to die? He wrote that question on a piece of paper and had a bunch of directors, 16 different directors altogether, answer that question. They were put in a chair in front of a camera. There was a 10-minute reel of film in there, and they could take as much of that 10 minutes as they wanted to, or they could make it very short and just kind of get the exercise over and done with. It's a really fascinating compilation of short clips. It's almost like a themed bunch of TikTok reels or something like that, where each person, each director gets a prompt. It's the same question, and they give you their spur of the moment answer. Not a lot of time to rehearse. I don't think there were any take twos. If there were, they certainly didn't make it known as such. It feels pretty spontaneous. Of course, these are directors, many of them very loquacious, having lots of big thoughts and ideas and a great expressive vocabulary and a manner of delivery that makes their segments all the more memorable. So let me just read to you some of the names that were around in 1982 Cannes. I'm not going to read the whole list. It's available on the cover, but these are the names that sort of jump out at me. Jean-Luc Godard, he gets kind of head billing, and he takes pretty much his full 10 minutes, although a lot of it is him just smoking his cigar and letting the smoke drift around and ponderous silences. But it's classic. It's great. Godard from 1982, when he was kind of revitalizing his career after kind of 70s in the wilderness, so to speak. Paul Morrissey, Monty Hellman, Susan Seidelman. That's interesting to see her. She kind of had a rediscovery or a resurgence in recent years. She was just a upcoming young female filmmaker at that time. Rainer Werner Fassbinder. This is one of his last statements that he made publicly. He was dead just a few weeks later. Werner Herzog, very prophetic. He's talking about ordering things off our TV and computers, and the guy knows what he's talking about. Let's see what else. Steven Spielberg has a very memorable piece there where he's talking about really the future of cinema, thinking of it in business terms. Michelangelo Antonioni, Wim Wenders, the director himself, and then he gives the last word to Yilmaz Güney, and he explains why he gives that relatively unknown filmmaker the final statement. So that was a 45-minute short subject. I don't know if it had ever been released or even that broadly circulated, but what a fascinating time capsule it is, Room 666. So 40 years later, Room 999 is shot by, again, Lubna Playust. I don't really know anything about her, but she gets an even longer list of directors together, including some prominent names. Wim Wenders himself, he, again, sort of like in the Godard role, the senior statesman, if you will, of art house cinema. He kind of kicks off the conversation, and he's kind of in a pessimistic mode. He's thinking about the future and not really liking what he envisions. David Cronenberg pops up for a brief statement. Joachim Trier, director of The Worst Person in the World. Now let's see, James Gray, Arnaud Desplechin, Lynn Ramsey. These are names that I've gotten to know through their work published by the Criterion Collection. Claire Denis, she's got a very nice statement. Baz Luhrmann, not a Criterion guy, but pretty well known. Olivier Assayas, Paolo Sorrentino, Christian Mungiu, again, more Euro art house director types. Not really much of the American. There's no equivalent of a Steven Spielberg in this list. But I will say this, Room 999 doesn't have the appeal of looking back 40 years and seeing, wow, what these interesting directors of the early 80s went on to accomplish afterwards. I think Spielberg, in his talk, just to go back to that one for a minute, I think he was bringing E.T. to the Cannes Film Festival, perhaps. And of course, E.T. went on to become the biggest commercial success of all time for quite a few years. Spielberg didn't exactly know what E.T. was going to do for his career, but it did take him to a whole nother level. And of course, he went on to do amazing work. He's really one of the, the most towering figures as far as the global reach and commercial impact of cinema. You got to give the guy his credit, even though I'm not like a super big fan of his films, but you got to give the respect where it's due. So yeah, so really capturing that little slice of time in 1982 and being able to look back and see what's happened in history that these individuals at that time really didn't know what to anticipate. So we're in a similar situation with Room 999. This is made, of course, right at the tail end of the global pandemic in 2022. There was still, in fact, one of the directors is still wearing a mask, although he takes it off for the video. But yeah, kind of still in that emerging phase. And film theaters were just starting to open up again, and where all the audience is going to come back. There's a lot of conversation in here about streaming platforms and kind of the pressure and the conformity that maybe comes around when you've got the Amazons and the Netflixes and the other companies driven by algorithms and writing screenplays by committee that are just designed to scratch all the little itches out there in the viewing audience and, scroll the next movie as soon as this one ends. We'll give them something that's just like it, except a little bit different. And you have this kind of homogenization effect that takes place. So there's a lot of discussion about that in Room 999. But so what about these films? They are not great cinematic viewing experiences. I mean, they are truly static shots. The camera never moves. There's a room, there's a chair. Sometimes the characters move around. The directors who are being interviewed, they'll move around a little bit. But this is not a film that you're going to watch for the visual appeal. There's not a lot that's interesting going on. Even the room itself is very bland. It's what they have to say, maybe the body language with which they're saying it. That does kind of give the full, the full impression of what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're seeing as they think about the future of cinema. And what I like about this Blu-ray, even though I haven't really yet started to do it, is it gives you the opportunity to engage or maybe just do some reflection on what each of these directors had to say to whatever extent you think it's worth. You can just hit the pause button after that scene, or even, with the options of the chapters settings, you can go back and forth. I think each film is sequenced according to the list of names. So if you want to find a certain director, unfortunately, you don't have a name menu on the disc itself, like when you put it up on your screen. But you can just kind of scroll ahead a certain number of chapters, listen to one person's answer to that question. Is cinema a language to be forgotten and an art about to die? And then kind of riff yourself off of what they're saying about the nature of cinema. And so I'll kind of just give my own answers to those questions. So again, let me just make sure I've got it correctly. Is cinema a language about to get lost, an art about to die? Well, I'm going to say this. I think cinema is, if you think about what is the essential act of cinema, what is the moment, the presence, the event that's happening that we call cinema, it's not necessarily people sitting in upholstered chairs looking at a screen in a large room. That's a version of cinema. But cinema can also be sitting by myself at home watching it on my TV. Cinema can be now, with the technology, the act of watching it on a phone while you're out for a jog or standing in line or mounting it on your dashboard of your car, which you're not supposed to do. But, cinema is the visual and auditory observance of two-dimensional media that may be acting out a story. It may just be shifting random colors and sounds around for some kind of stimulative effect. But when they're talking about the future of cinema, of course, these people, these directors are talking about, the idea of making movies that, reach out to an audience and engage with them in a kind of a more formal setting. And so cinema was in its kind of heyday, its golden age, people going to theaters, often in large numbers, and having a communal experience of watching the movie up on a screen. And I love doing that. I just saw David Lynch's Dune on the big screen last night with a pretty good sized audience, about 150 people altogether. And it was a lot of fun. Not a great movie, but it had absolutely cool moments, and the reactions of the crowd around me and the dimensions of the image, the sound and all of that, the music, were all pretty impressive. So yeah, I'm kind of wandering in my thoughts away from reviewing this, but because there's so much intellectual content in these statements that these very thoughtful, intelligent, and observant directors are sharing, and they're also in the midst of their own careers, and they're dealing with the pressures of the industry, or the struggle, the fight that it takes to get your message out there. I just find it really fascinating. Even some of the names that are maybe not so known or prominent, maybe they're going to go on to do great things, who knows, but they all had interesting stuff to say. Some were, more flippant and funny. Some were pretty serious. Some were interestingly speculative and kind of forward thinking. And so I'm not going to really try to sum up the, beyond what I've already maybe mentioned here, who I thought had the best take or anything like that. But I do really recommend this. If you really like to maybe get a little reflective and philosophical and thoughtful about what it is that us movie watchers are doing, and why do we do it? Who are we doing it with? What's the purpose or function of all of this? What good or what difference does it make, right? Room 666 and Room 999 give you two moments in time at the very privileged environment stirred up by the Cannes Film Festival. Even though there's no, red carpet, no glamorous scenes there, these are cool people with a cultural perspective that I think we all benefit from understanding. So this beautiful disc from Janus Contemporaries brings it home. You can watch these films on the Criterion channel, but you can't necessarily flip from one to the other using your remote control like you can if you have it on Blu-ray. So that lends a very practical value to having this disc rather than just streaming it if you happen to be a lifetime subscriber to the Criterion channel, such as I am. All right, so that's my review. Get it. It's a really interesting, thoughtful work, and I might even do some more work with it. I might do some prompts and answer or respond to some of these folks myself. Yeah, who knows? Maybe I will, maybe I won't.